Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second world meeting of Jesus' friends and Chico Xavier and his legacy. The theme of this second meeting is Time to Heal with Chico Xavier. My name is Cláudio Yudi, and we will be talking about healing dialogue with Chico Xavier. I am a veterinarian, a professor of the University of Uberaba, and a practitioner at the veterinary hospital in Uberaba. I also work at the Spiritual Center Bittencourt Sampaio and Pedro e Paulo. The theme of today, Healing Dialogue, has a lot to do with our daily lives. Every time we study the Spiritist doctrine, for many, many years, we realize that we have to put the doctrine into practice in our everyday lives, in our home, our workplace, in our daily routine. Spiritism shouldn't be worked only within the spiritual centers. It should expand to the daily lives, and the spirituality that we learn inside the spiritual centers through the study of the Spiritist doctrine, the books by Chico Xavier, that here for sure is a complement to the works of Allan Kardec. We have to put the works into practice inside us every single day. We work at a veterinary hospital with different kinds of collaborators and working with students, employees, nurses, etc. What is missing there, what is lacking, is that, as you may have also examples in your work and family, what we realize is that many of the problems that occur and even conflicts that we have are due to the lack of dialogue, due to a problem in communication. What we realize today is that many companies, peoples, and professionals have a very good technical part. These people do actually master and they can do adequately their jobs, but what is missing is interpersonal relation. The communication of many people in many ways. So dialogue can be done directly, it can be done through video, and it can also be done through social media. But for sure, the dialogue that we are looking for here is a different type. It is a dialogue where all our conversation, our fraternal conversation, is also for us a dialogue where we are going to help people. And that's why we call it healing dialogue. And where is this theme from? As we are always studying the works of Chico Xavier, in our hands the book Caminhos de Volta, which means Pathway to Return, whose preface dates to 30th of October 1975 here in Uberaba. This is a very interesting book because it explains a little bit how Chico Xavier worked on the day that he had a public meeting. On these days, many people looked for Chico Xavier to comment on a daily life theme, something that they had heard on the radio, they had read on the newspaper or watched on television. Both the TV and radio were important means of communication at the time, and so Chico would do the dialogue among people. So in the public meeting, they studied a gospel theme, and after that, they psychographed, Chico Xavier psychographed the words of many different spirits, and the set of this collection is this book called Pathways to Return. So the title of this chapter that we are studying today is called Healing Dialogue. So what was the main theme on that day? It was dialogue. So more than 40 years ago, the problem of dialogue was still occurring. And even today, the theme dialogue is still remaining. So how many people, thousands of people, came to Chico Xavier just to speak, to be able to have a dialogue with him. And we know, due to the biographers that we know, that Chico many times spoke, and many other times he just listened, because silence was one way of talking to people, and people needed to be heard. And nowadays, in the 21st century, when we have the biggest and best means of communication as never before, we still have a lack for healing dialogue. Salesmen, for example, they say that you have to approach the client very closely in order to be able to sell. But we've been through a pandemic, and the distance forced us not to talk close to each other. But it is so important. This kind of talk is so important. At university, we realize this difference between when students are there, present there, and when they are just remotely there. They are complementary, but it's very important sometimes to call the student, call a professor, or call a friend to talk to you. And this can be transferred to all the other parts of our lives. This is learning. This is practicing. This is an important book, because if you practice, you learn how to do it. And we are here to highlight that these are the ways suggested by Chico Xavier. This is one among many of his books, and sometimes people don't know this book, and that's why we are here in the second meeting to try to call your attention to that. We know many of Chico Xavier's works, and this is one that is so much important for us, talking about this healing dialogue. Most people think that healing only happens through medication, through paths, or magnetized water. Yes, that's true. This also helps. And other forms of cure that we know in the spiritual centers also help. But what is missing, what is lacking, is dialogue. Healing dialogue. So if we listened more, and if we spoke less, and when we spoke, if we spoke out of wisdom, we are sure to be in a better situation. Here we are learning, and we are maturing as well with the passing of time, with our experience. So the youngsters, they are always in a hurry. You see also people, more mature people, trying to cope better with time. And so it's very important for us to practice dialogue, to converse with people. And if you don't have a facility to do that, I mean, if you're not used to talking so well, you can exchange experience with people who are more experienced and can help you to get there. We have a case here in the hospital where we work, and we realize that many of the youngsters in veterinary medicine have a lot of difficulty to talk. And the youngsters in general, They have a difficulty in talking to the pet's owner about the problem that the pet has, and also being able to be silent when necessary. So I think this subject is really important, and I hope we are clear so that you can make good use of this lecture. So for you to have a clear reference, we are going to use a few paragraphs from this text, and the person can then afterwards search for those paragraphs to do a deep dive of this study using the book. So it is a message from Emmanuel. Emmanuel signs this message. Observe the extension of the human suffering and make the verb an instrument of relief and peace. Relief and peace. What is the extension or the extent of the human suffering? It's near our home, in our district, in the spiritual center. Many times people imagine that in the spiritual center only health people attend, but no, quite the opposite. The spiritual center receives people that do volunteer work, and these are people who are looking for something, sometimes even because of their consciousness, something that I have done in the past, and sometimes they may have even committed a severe mistake, and they are trying to make up for that. And people come with conflicts, with sufferings, and we have to understand the following. The person who looks for our spiritual center is a person in need. Of course, there are people who come out of love. Yes, that is true. We also have people who come because they have come since they were children and they have a habit of coming. But today we realize that most of the people who come have some suffering story there. So it is our role to have an initial dialogue, to invite this person to come to our spiritual center, listen to the lectures, receive the pass, drink the water. So any person who is suffering from affliction needs to have their consciousness calmed. It has been proven scientifically that when a person is afflicted or has been through a moment of conflict or despair, this person has a decrease in its capacity, cognitive capacity, in their cognitive capacity. So the more desperate, the more afraid they are, the more afflicted they are, the less they are able to think and reflect. And that's why our role is to help calm these people using the word. You have to tell your brother that he has to be calm. Calm yourself, accept the situation, and let's go forward. For everything there is a solution. So we have to calm our brother, our sister who looks for us. So verb here must be an instrument of peace. So you will find people who are sick of the soul, people who have psychological misadjustment, people who may not have been able to fulfill the commitment made, and now they journey in this world disappointed with themselves. Our brother, Dr. Inácio Ferreira, says that all of us are a little bit sick of the soul, some more, some less. And there are people who are sick of the soul and who receive the pass, prayer, and water and have a significant improvement. Others will need medications to decrease their anxiety, insomnia, and others will need more demanding therapies, and others will need to be hospitalized. So sometimes we are a little bit better or a little bit worse, but all of us are sick of the soul. And our organism reflects our mind, reflects our creations, mind creations. And all the books by Chico Xavier, by André Luiz, where André Luiz, for example, comments that what our mind does reflects on our organism. And so sometimes we are well, but we are afflicted and our organism becomes sick. Then we improve, we get better, and then we have newer afflictions, and sometimes we may get sick again. So this is part of our daily lives. So André Luiz said, well, when a problem ends, you might expect another. But when you are expecting the next one, you have already improved your capacity of bearing problems. You have improved tolerance because God doesn't give you a higher burden than you need. All of us have brought some sort of psychological misadjustment from other lives. We are the result of the sum of our previous existences. So we have, of course, misadjustments, and they may come up in your life at any time. It may be when you are a child, when you are a teenager, young, when you are an adult, or even when you are an elderly person. So these misadjustments, psychological misadjustments, may appear, and we have to be ready to have a dialogue with these people. So people who haven't been able to fulfill the commitments made in this world and they journey disappointed with themselves, they also need our help because they haven't been able to do what was planned for their lives. So there were environment problems, perhaps health problems, educational problems, but also the problem of that person who wasn't brave enough to take on that responsibility. So we realize that when we read the book, Sigismundo has a problem with his future father, Sigismundo. His father did not accept the reincarnation of his son because the commitment had been forgotten. So the spiritual team had to go there and talk to that parent, to those parents, to accept Sigismundo as their child due to problems of the past. So many times people forget, because there is the forgetfulness about the other previous lives. There is this veil because people don't remember it, but they have it unconsciously. So if a person is screaming, if a person is yelling, we have to know that this person is not well. This person is at the moment sick of the soul. So it's no use fighting back. It's no use raising your voice because that person is at that moment sick of the soul. There isn't any doctor in the world that's going to provoke more disease into a person who is sick. Every doctor will try to, in any way, diminish this affliction. So the desperate who walk in the edges of delinquency, the afflicted, almost all linked to processes of distress. So the desperate and the afflicted, most of those or all of those go through a moment of most affliction, desperation, because they are disbelieving in life. They have a total disbelief in the future of life, to have a faith that the problems are just temporary. So we don't understand yet that what we go through now is important to our evolution degree, and that what we go through considering immortality of life is very little. But we want solutions that are prompt, immediate, because we have a complex life and there are many factors involved. So all these factors influence us. And we are, of course, all the time influenced, but we also influence people. So incarnated people influence incarnated people. Disincarnated or disembodied also influence disembodied, but we might influence the other way around as well, and we might attract these to our sphere. Everyone is sick of the soul that has to be medicated, above all through healing dialogue. Through healing dialogue. These are words of tranquility. Brother, everything will be okay. Everything will be all right in the end. This is just temporary. Pray. Let's pray together. And we can, of course, include your name in the book of prayers and vibrations. We can give this person the water for him to take, because despair will not help you. So affliction makes us be more afflicted, and we realize that people, they sometimes need a lot of help that is just listening and speaking. So we keep asking, what is missing? We have to talk a little bit more to these people. Or is there a sort of unpreparedness in terms of education? Or is it a family issue? We are not saying that we have the solution to the problem, but we want you, when you have a brother or a sister that needs your help, say a good word to this brother or sister. Give him a hope word. This is how Jesus worked. Jesus, through his verb, through his word, he took the gospel and he didn't need to write anything. Many people have looked for Chico Xavier and just to listen, just to be able to listen how much Chico had suffered as well. And the solution isn't immediate. We want a prompt, immediate solution, but many times it's not there yet. So sometimes the problem is going to be solved eventually. We know that any severe disease or any severe health problems which requires doctor support, of course, is very important. And that's why we have emergency rooms, because they are there exactly for that, for emergencies. But in our daily lives, we have to know how to solve problems through prayer, through the friendly word. So, how many people come to the spiritual centers afflicted? They can't observe the future, they can't see the future. Mostly when we are going through crises such as the ones we have been through, we have to be able to communicate better. So, at home, share with your family. Try to radiate the light of understanding that establishes tranquility and security. If all the family is confused, is not well, we have to be the anchor. We have to be the stability. We have to be the one that is going to bring peace, stability, less affliction. We have to be the north, we have to be the safe compass, we have to be the orientation, because otherwise the house will fall. How many times we have seen families that get lost because of little things, material things. So it makes us rethink. And let's do this, let's play this role. If we are trying to live according to the Spiritist doctrine, we have to modify ourselves in order to help people modify themselves. If you want to modify someone, it's not through imposition, it's through example. You have to give an example, set the example, be the model, have the right attitude. It is your model of work. We learned that from Chico. Chico listened to people. If we see that from that point of view, Chico has worked through dialogue. Observe that in the book, in charity, in the material charity that he gave to people, part of the time of Chico Xavier's work was talking, dialogues. How many people have stories during this event? They will be told, of course, stories that have been written in the books, which are actually dialogue. So it is the important dialogue which is the north, which is the way. And Chico says, dialogue helps us be calmer and be able to calm the people in our family, the people around you. When you are at work, whenever possible, you will become the exhauster of bitter confidences, bitter conflicts. So gossip, for example, in companies, things that happen in companies, those who work know very well the well-known saying that we have a folks radio, a wireless telephone. What is the meaning of this expression here in Brazil? It means that people gossip and tell each other what they have heard without checking the information. And you should be the exhauster. You should be the person who will clean this environment, who will clean the environment of impurity. So we have to stop the gossip. We have to calm the people. Mainly if you are a leader. In a hospital, we work with a very big company, for example, but sometimes we need a leader to tell us that the discussion is over and we have to leave this behind and end that topic. I'm not here talking about a political leader. I'm talking about a leader as a person who organizes that work community. It can be the family leader. It may be my mother, father, grandparents. It is the leader, meaning here the person who knows how to converse, to talk, in order to diminish conflict. And here in companies nowadays, we have people who are a conflict manager. So they are conflict managers in order to help the company deal with different kinds of conflicts. Nowadays, even directors is basically that, the conflict manager that is going to deal with the conflicts that come from, that spring from other employees below his level. So you have to remember, try to remember, for example, a case in your work that started with a little sparkle of a gossip, and then it turned into a bonfire. So we have to see that in some companies, people are at war. People are trying to get the other out of their jobs in order to get an increase in their salary, get more attention. And all this is happening in our world. That's why we have to put the doctrine into practice, not only within the four walls of the spiritual center, but struggle as hard as possible to have the doctrine inside us so that we can take it to our work. Ask yourself, are we doing the work in the ethic way? Are we using dialogue? Am I learning through what I am doing? So Chico in this picture, here you can see him with a dog. He used to talk to animals as well because he believed that dialogue was possible with animals too. And how many people need the animals to be able to learn to talk? How many people live alone and have no one to talk to because maybe they may be unhealthy, maybe they can't leave their homes, and animals are their way of talking. Many people here talk to their dogs, their cats, to a bird. They stroke their pets. Chico used to talk to animals, to nature. Jesus too. He used to talk to nature as a whole, and nature would obey the order of the master. In the manifestations of public sphere, try to select concepts that will bring you ideas that will not encourage violence or discord. So consider the way you are talking. Are you generating violence or discord? Look at this critical moment we are going through in the world. Because of the different noises in dialogue, noises in communication, we are having serious problems in the world. So we have somehow to improve that. We should not wait for others to do it. It starts with you. You may think, well, only me? Yes, it starts with you. You are the first person to stop violence, to work towards the other way, because the war is a mixture of selfishness and lack of communication. Why? Because there is no communication and there is extreme selfishness, and that leads to war. So we need to have our point of views and to know that in whatever sphere, for example, in the public sphere, if another candidate has won, we will have to wait for the next time a candidate can run, because these discussions that we have will bring more distress. And the population as a whole, in the case of politics, suffers a lot with that. But this goes for other spheres as well. So let's see what is going on and think if dialogue is not missing where we are. We have to learn with good examples as well as bad ones. And in the public means, you have to mobilize solidarity, kindness, diminish tiredness, and solitude for those brothers who are going through conflict and probation that may not even know. we don't understand. We don't put ourselves in that person's shoes to understand what are that person's probation, what that person is going through. We don't understand. So we many times ignore people. For example, people who are in the street, who are living in the street, and who may come to you, and in that moment we have nothing to give to that person, material things, I mean. But we may talk to that person. How are you doing today? Unfortunately, I have nothing to give you today, but keep going in your life, because some people turn their head to the other side, turn their face to the other side. I'm going to give you an example. We many times do food campaigns. We go to the supermarket doors, we stay there, we take people there, and we are dressed in a way that they know that we are there for a reason, and we give them pamphlets, ask them for charity if they can give us a kilo of rice or beans or any other food so that they can help Pedro and Paulo Institute. Many people ignore us. Many people don't look at our faces. Many people say, I don't help spiritual centers. And many others simply ignore. Many more people ignore us than help us. So out of 10 people, for example, one person helps. So on a day, we sometimes work for 10 hours to have 5 supermarket trolleys full of food. Of course, if everyone donated, we would be able to have about 15. But on a good day, we may manage to have 6, 7, 8, with many people working there. And we hear many more times no than yes. And this is very important for us there, because if we are there and we are not a good example, can you imagine, let alone the people who are living in the street, because people will judge. They will say, this person is a drug addict, that one is this or that, but this is not our role. Our role is not to judge. We have a story of Chico Xavier that one person got close to Chico Xavier and he was a little bit drunk. And he asked Chico for money. And he said, I want money to drink. I want money to buy the drink that I want to have. And Chico didn't say a word and gave this person the money. And people were shocked that Chico would give money to a person who was drunk. And they asked him, how could you do that? This person is drunk. And Chico said, well, he's half drunk. He's not yet so drunk, but he's bothering people. So we shall give him that so he may move away and not bother people. This is the situation now. Is it correct to have people living in the streets, drug addicts, alcoholics? No, it is not correct. But it's not only public policy that will solve that. We have to ask other questions. Do you think this person may have had an opportunity to have a job? Why would this person be here? So what we learn is not that it's not only the government's fault, it is the society's fault as a whole. So that why do we have pets in the street? Because people abandon cats and dogs in the street. They rarely do dogs bear clubs in the street. They don't. They suffer a lot. And there are a lot of dead animals in the streets. So animals who live in the streets, they are helped by people who give them food. Okay, this is very noble, but if everyone could be a responsible tutor of an animal, we wouldn't have any more animals in the streets. But unfortunately, there are people who abandon the animals. And if everyone abandons dogs and cats in the streets, no public service will be able to help that situation enough. Here in Uberaba, we have to sterilize around 6,000 animals dogs and cats every year, so that in 10 or 20 years we might have a decrease in the number of pets in the streets. And parallel to that, we have to educate people so that they can stop abandoning animals in the street and that they have responsible ownership of animals. This is talking about a scalable problem. We are not going to be able to solve immediately. This does not exist. We have to do phase by phase. We have to walk towards the solution. It's not our own fault only. It's the humanity. The humanity has to learn all that. This is why we are having this lecture, for us to question ourselves. Is there enough dialogue? Is there enough dialogue with this person who is in the street? Well, sometimes we have to talk to this person and tell this person, you know, God bless you, may God be with you. We have to bring hope. Chico Xavier used to say that what we do inside the spiritual center, in whichever work that we do there, when we are distributing food, in general, in the street, is to give people hope. And this is what the doctrine is about, is the doctrine of hope. It is the doctrine of comfort, the comforting doctrine, because there are many people who are afflicted. So don't charge your voice with fulminating vibrations when you are faced with intemperance, because otherwise you will not heal the sick one. You will become sicker. Remember, the doctor will never come to a patient and say, no, you will become sicker. No, the doctor is going to advise the patient. He will say, you have to take this medicine, be less nervous, do this diet, rest a little bit more. So all the health providers, they try to help people, struggle to help improve people's health, not the opposite. And we have to remember the following. The medication, mainly the medications for anxiety, insomnia, they don't heal the disease. Most of these medications, they block what we call synapses, or the communication between neurons. What they do is they decrease the pace of this communication, so that when people are agitated, when they are afflicted, our head starts to make connections very fast. And sometimes we reach severe levels. So when we take these medications, what will this medication do? It will decrease the speed at which this communication is going to occur. So we will be, let's say, sedated, so that we can, in a sedated way, organize our ideas and put things in the right place within our mind. Because we are aware that we have different kinds of problems: health, family, the death of people that we love, work problems, losing our jobs. We know there are those many problems. We are aware of all that, but we cannot worsen that situation. Those of us who are in the doctrine, we need to have hope, even in the worst situations. And we can realize that every situation in the world has been through afflicting moments. We have been through worser moments, pandemics, wars, and they still go on, but there is an improvement. So I always tell my students, you have to study history, because if you study history, you can see what was done in the past, and you can foresee what might be done in the future. And you have to remember that in between, there is Jesus there. Jesus is the governor of earth. So he knows that 2,000 years for the gospel is very little. Chico has already said that. 2,000 years is not enough. The news of the gospel is still going on. Now, the next part relates to the environment. So what happens when an environment is filled with imbalance? when it is filled with affliction. For example, the environment in your family or in your work. Here in Brazil, we have an expression that says that the environment is heavy loaded. What is it that makes the environment heavy loaded? It is us. Some people say, oh, I have to bring some sort of charm in order to clean the environment. So they ask you to bring salt. They even mentioned a black cat. If you must bring a black cat into your home because the black cat will be able to clean the energy. But what is the source of this negative energy? It is us. So in an environment, when we lower the mental vibration of that environment, the closer we get to people with the same kind of vibration. Remember that something that is equal attracts, they are equal. So if you have a, let's say, heavy loaded environment by an unbalanced use of your mind, spirits which are in the same level of vibration will come into the environment and will start to worsen the situation. So watch out for what's going on in your mind. And the more you have disharmony, the more important it is for us to do healing talk. Because healing talk is able to suppress modesty and obsessions in its root. So the more problems we have, the more dialogue we need to have. So be you. It must be you. Yes, but there are moments that I am the afflicted one. That's true. That's true. Sometimes we need also people to do this dialogue to us. But we who are a tiny little bit more aware of what the doctrine spirit tells us about the truth, is that is little enough for us to be able to act, for us to be able to be the ones to make it work. Because the Spiritist doctrine is a doctrine of prayer, but also of action. And this action, where we look for our afflicted brothers and sisters, and where we can talk to them, have a healing dialogue with them, is essential. We have to do it. We have to remember what we have to do. The lecturers have to take a positive hope message. We have to do that. Check the 300 years of persecution against Christians. How could they be singing? They were singing to their masters, knowing that they were going to be killed by animals and people. Youngsters, children, the elderly, adults. Why? Because they knew that that affliction moment was temporary. Okay, I'm not going to say that we are going to be crucified. Crucifixion nowadays is different. It is in unemployment. It is being badly spoken of in the social media. This is the kind of thing that we have today, virtual crucifixion. Some people don't care. They do it and they don't care. But you see, there are people who commit suicide because of that, because the person cannot tolerate, cannot bear what has been said against them. So this is true. This is happening. We know people who have been through that. So these are the occult unfortunate. So we can never abandon, as Chico has said, we can never abandon the suburbs of the cities, because there is where the people who are in despair and are afflicted, this is where they are. So everyone is short of time. So let's start with an hour a week, an hour every 15 days, an hour a month to help people. Chico, in Pedro Leopoldo, when he didn't have anything to take to people, he took water. He took his presence, his voice, and water. So, whatever the circumstance in which you are, season what you say with kindness and comprehension. Season what you say with kindness and comprehension. With goodness and comprehension. Give a person a friendly word, Spend some time using good words. Check that in medium meetings or in meetings where there is healing, there is a medium that comes to talk with embody it and talk to the benefactor, and he comes to talk using goodness, kindness, comprehension. So we need a disembodied spirit to teach us through a medium about goodness and comprehension. Is it valid? Yes, of course. But if we know that, why can't we do that? Why can't we do that? If we are all mediums, all of us have to remember that we do not have to be embodied by a spirit to be able to do that, to talk with goodness and understanding. We have to incorporate this goodness and comprehension words in our vocabulary. Incorporate the words of goodness and comprehension. So, I leave you this message of love and of peace so that everyone can understand that it is with Jesus Christ and Chico Xavier the hope of a dialogue. He has taught us a healing dialogue. Jesus has taught us, and Chico has also taught us. Jesus gave people innumerable lessons through parables, through dialogues with their apostles, disciples, people around him, and Chico used to talk to people through dialogue. So it is the dialogue. Chico worked with mediunity, charity, and also through dialogue. So this is one more point for us to reflect. The words of Chico Xavier, his wise words, this man's wise words, that is the spirit, that is the future of humanity, the future of man. We will have to learn to talk. We will have to learn to have dialogue. The instructors of André Luiz, Clarencio, Alexandre, and many others, they used the dialogue. They used talk. This was how André Luiz has showed us through his books. Let's observe the dialogues. Let's observe the importance to talk. And it is our role as Christians and as Spiritist Christians so that we can understand this message of the healing dialogue. May you all have peace.